looking tonight at the importance of parental involvement in pre-marriage relationships. I think one of the problems with the world's method of dating is it puts a lot in the hands of the children and not enough in the hands of the parents. And so parental involvement is extremely important. Maybe I can lay it out this way. We would agree that parents should lead their children concerning finances as they enter into adulthood. We believe that we shouldn't just leave children to figure that out, but rather we should help them and guide them in that subject. We agree that a dad should teach his boys how to mow, how to run the weed eater, how to check the oil, and how to check the tire pressure. There are certain things that almost everyone would agree that these are things that they need taught. And it is the parents' responsibility to help show these things and to reveal these things and to lead them down that path. We would agree that a mother should teach her daughters certain things before they leave the house, not to just leave them to figure out on their own one day, but rather to instruct them and to guide them and to lead them. And so we understand the importance of parental involvement in a lot of things, but the question is, how involved are we to be when it comes to this so important subject of choosing a spouse? I think we would all agree that if you don't teach your daughter how to run a dishwasher, she will figure it out. I can promise you. If you don't teach your boy how to mow, he's going to figure it out. But if you don't help them to find the right spouse, that's not something you want to find out later because it ends in heartbreak. So when it comes to a young man becoming a husband and a young lady becoming a wife, this is not the time for parents to back out of the picture. But this is a time for parents to be extremely involved and for young people to allow your parents to be extremely involved. There are many verses that deal with parental involvement of children, and this is why we don't just have one text tonight. I want to look at several of these. And one of the most familiar, of course, would be Proverbs chapter 22 and verse number 6. He says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." We've heard this verse many times. But I want us to recognize in each of these verses is the importance of parental involvement in the life of the children during that phase of life. It is extremely important, and many are familiar with at least the second half of Ephesians chapter 6 and verse number 4, "And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." And that first half, by the way, is extremely important. It's not wise to bypass that. But we again see the involvement with parents in the life of their young people. And we have great principles concerning parental involvement and the things of God in Deuteronomy chapter number 6 and verse number 6 and 7, verses we've read before. "These words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." Again, we see the parental involvement in the life of the young people while they are in that phase of life, turning into adults. Perhaps one of the greatest set of verses dealing with parents training children for adulthood is in Psalm chapter 127, and verse number 3, 4, and 5, he says, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." And if you remember the application to that, the quiver full of them is not just having a house full of kids. The quiver full are having arrows that are ready, having young people that are ready to go into adulthood, ready to go into what God has for them, and the parents are involved in that process, of course. We also know that there are verses that encourage children to let their parents be what God intends them to be. Now, I'm going to say this again because it's extremely important. It is one thing for parents to seek to be involved in the life of their young people. But young people, you must allow your parents to have that influence in their life. And we see verses that help us with this. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, he says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For they," speaking of these things that your parents have taught you, "if you'll listen to these, they shall be an ornament of grace into thy head and chains about thy neck." And we can see some of these instructions that were given in order to protect the heart of the young person. In Proverbs chapter number 4, in verse number 23, he says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence." These are the things you're teaching them. As a matter of fact, in verse number 20 here, he actually starts off and says, "My son, attend to my words." Pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. And one of the things he tells them in these instructions is keep thy heart with all diligence. You must protect your heart, for out of it are the issues of life. If you don't protect your heart, you're going to lead to heartache and heartbreak and all these struggles. And so the lesson here is in verse 20, this is something a parent is teaching the child. And so we see the importance again of the parental involvement when it comes to these things. Perhaps the most pointed verse, and I even debated whether I wanted to put this one up here, but perhaps the most pointed verses concerning parental involvement in guiding their children's relationship is in Proverbs chapter number 23. And in verse number 26, he says, "My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways." Well, this verse is not just a standalone verse. It actually is in relation to relationships. Because he goes on to say, "For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. Give me your heart, let me help you, otherwise you're going to end up making a great mistake." And so very pointed, but we certainly see the importance here in these verses. Verse number 28 of that text follows with, "She also lieth in wait as for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men." So again, the whole point is give me your heart and let thine eyes observe me. Let me be your parent. Let me be your guide, because I can help protect you from a lot of things. So we see this involvement. Now let me say this. There is as much responsibility on the parents as there is in the young people when it comes to marriage. There is as much responsibility on the parents as there is on the young people when it comes to this decision of marriage. As we look at these verses collectively, we notice a few key truths concerning the importance of parental involvement in the pre-marriage relationships. First thing we see, I want you to notice, is parents must have the heart of their young people. We must. And Proverbs chapter 23, verse 26, a verse that we looked at, he says, "My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways." We see here this plea and this desire from the parent saying, give me your heart. Now, there's two things that are implied here. One, we see the desire of the parent to have the heart, but we also see that the decision is up to the young person to give your parents that heart. Because as parents, we can strive for it and we can long for it and we can desire to have it, but if our young people say no, there's really not a whole lot we can do. And so we have to seek for that, we must strive for that, and we must long for that. But as young people, you also must understand these are the people that God has placed in my life. And so the attitude is, I give you my heart. And we see that in this text. Let me give you a few things that will help you. If you have their heart, dealing with relationships, if you have their heart, they will trust your motive. When you say yes or you say no, they're going to trust your motive if you have their heart. If you don't have their heart, they're not going to trust your motive. And so if you have their heart, they will trust your motive. If you have their heart, they will know your love for them. You're not just out to get them. You're not just there to tell them no, but you love them and you care for them. And they know that because you have their heart. And let me just say this, having the heart of your young people takes work. If your husband shouldn't demand your heart without working for it, then don't do that to your children. Right? I mean, what would we think of a husband who said, you're supposed to honor me. You're supposed to respect me. But does nothing to earn that and to work for that and to display their love and their commitment. Well, you can imagine what kind of product that would produce. And so we would say, if this is the same attitude towards our children, give me your heart. Why don't you trust me? Why don't you let me lead you? Why don't you do all these things? But you don't earn that heart and you don't display your love and your commitment to them. Don't expect them to just follow out of pure submission. We need to work for that and display that, and they need to know that if they do give you their heart, that you're going to treat it properly and carefully. And so if you have their heart, you can help them. If you don't have their heart, you can't help them. If you have their heart, you can help them. If you have their heart, you can guide them. I don't know that I'm properly expressing this. I hope that I am, because if you don't have the heart of your young person, how in the world are you going to help guide them and lead them through life if their heart is somewhere else and you're just a noise in the distance, giving instruction and giving discipline? You must have their heart, because when you have that, you can guide them and they will trust you. They are humble. When you have their heart, they are humble and they are teachable, and you can speak with them and you can encourage them and you can redirect them if needed. But if you don't have the heart of your young people, none of that's going to work. Not a bit of it. Matter of fact, if you don't have their heart, every time you sit down to correct them, you're going to find that their heart goes farther and farther away. Can I say this? Having the heart of your young people doesn't start when they're looking at getting married. That starts way before that. As a young person, you're getting their heart, and because you're there to help them and to guide them and to lead them. And if you have their heart, they will have a desire to follow your leadership because they trust you. I was talking to a preacher today, and he said one of the most heartbreaking moments for him was when his daughter, as they were approaching marriage with a young man that she had a relationship with and was looking at getting married, and she came to her dad and she said, "Dad, is it okay if I love him?" And part of her felt like she was betraying her dad because her dad had her heart. And she felt like as this emotion was transferring to this young man, she was struggling. But he said, to me, that was the greatest compliment that she could give me. It wasn't an insult to me as a dad. It meant I had her heart. And she had given it to me, and she sought my permission to let somebody else have her heart, which, by the way, parents, we have to let that happen. And so we must have that heart. We must have that heart. And if we do, they'll have a desire to follow your leadership. Now let me help you if that wasn't convincing enough. If you don't have their heart, you can guarantee that their heart will lead them astray. The heart is desperately wicked. The heart is deceitful above all. If you don't have their heart, somebody will. Something will. It may be their own self. But if you don't have their heart, if you don't have their heart will lead them astray. Their heart will deceive them. Their heart will lead them into emotional struggles. Without that parental influence and that parental guidance, holding on to that heart is so vulnerable to all the hurts and all the aches that life can give it. And so if you don't have their heart will lead them, not might, it will lead them into emotional struggles. Their heart will take them into physical mistakes and regrets. If you don't have their heart, there's going to be a whole lot of mistakes and regrets and heartaches and heartbreaks, emotionally, physically, in every way possible, because their heart is just bouncing around to whatever wants it. If you don't have their heart will hurt many people and not care. The world does not care if your children hurt. It does not care. The devil does not care if your child has a broken heart. Does not care. Matter of fact, I think he would take it as a victory. If he can get Christian children and have their heart torn in pieces and emotionally destroyed and hurting and all of these things, I guarantee you the devil wants to do that. So the heart will hurt many people and not even care. It is my desire, and I think it ought to be all of our desire, that my children can say about my relationship with them, as Psalm 57:7 says, "My heart is fixed. O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise." You know what I want for my children? I want my children to be able to come to me as their dad and say, "Dad, my heart is fixed on you. Here's my heart. It's not bouncing around all over the place, but it is fixed. According to God's plan, according to God's will." And that's what I have to long for as a parent, is to have that. In children and young people, this is what you ought to strive to do, to have a heart that is fixed, trusting the ones that God has put in your life. This starts early, as we said, and it is strengthened often. If you don't have their heart now, don't expect to have it when they're approaching marriage. If you're not going to spend time and get that heart now, what value will your opinion be when they're choosing a spouse? It's just another opinion at that point. But if you have their heart and you say, "I think we need to talk about something," you're not just noise. What you say means something to them. So having their heart is extremely, extremely important. Let me give you a few reasons, 3 reasons tonight why it is important to have their heart. Number 1, the one who has the heart can place the heart. So my children give me their heart. If I have their heart, then I have some control over where that heart is placed. Does that make sense to everybody? Young people, if you don't give your heart to your parents, you will most likely place your heart in the wrong place at least once. This could be hobbies. This could be friends. But placing your heart and getting your heart off of the things of God and all the things that the world has to offer. But he who holds the heart gets to place the heart. I think this is extremely important when we're talking about relationships, because one day you're going to stand at an altar. And as your dad walks you down that altar, he's holding your hand and he's going to give your hand into their hand. But it ought to be so much more than just giving of a hand. He is holding a heart. And when that transition is made, and when dad is there and the preacher says, "Who gives this woman to this man?" it is more than just who's placing their hand in his hand, but there is a heart that is being held. And because dad has the heart, then he has the ability to place that heart where it ought to be. Because whoever has the heart gets to place the heart. That means this, young people, you have to be willing to give this to mom and dad. Mom, Dad, I'm not going to put my heart anywhere without your permission. I'm not going to put my heart anywhere without your instruction, without your guidance. I'm giving you my heart. I'm giving you everything about me, because he who holds the heart gets to place the heart. The parental involvement in this process is extremely important. Children, to young people, to take your heart out of mom and dad's hands because you want to place it somewhere else is extremely important. It's extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. I know I trusted you, mom and dad, but I really like this person. I don't know why you keep saying no. And what you're doing in essence is saying, I know I gave you my heart, I know I placed it in your hands, but give it back. I want to put it where I want to put it. It's so important, the parental involvement, young people, because if this is yours, you don't have the experience of life yet. You have emotions, you have thoughts, you have all these things, but it is such a mature thing as a young person to say, I am trusting the people that God has given to me. I have given mom and dad my heart, and I'm not going to take it away. Extremely mature and extremely important. Placing it in their hands and then letting them place that where it ought to be. Parents who do not strive to have the heart of their young people, you are trusting your young people to place their own heart where it needs to be. And therefore, you must bear some of the responsibility when it gets placed in the wrong place. See, we as parents, here's what's interesting. When I started the study for today, this is not the direction it was going. Because I can tell you now, tonight's message is all to the parents and some to the children. If you don't seek after the heart of your young people, and I know when they're young, listen, those who have young kids, you're in the easiest phase. It's so easy right now. You can walk in, give them a high five, and you have their heart. It's so easy. But I'm telling you, as they grow and their mind starts changing and life starts changing and they start thinking differently, and I know if you have young children, your children never do this, but when they do, it's so important that you have their heart. Because if you can't make it, if you can't make it through age 13, 14, and 15 because you didn't have their heart, good luck when they're 20, 21, 22. So important. You know what gets most Christian families through the hard time of young people? Because they have their heart. So I can sit down with my son and I can sit down with my daughter and say, I'm worried about this. This isn't right, or I'm concerned about this, or let's readjust these things. If you don't have their heart, it's not going to work. It's not. I've seen good families in churches, and I know many of you have as well. I've seen good families in churches, their kids turn 13, 14, 15, get a little off track, and they end up separating completely from their parents, really on mindset and everything else, because they didn't have their children's heart. It's so important that we have their heart. And if you think it's important to have their heart at 13, 14, 15, when it comes to you helping in this decision to find that spouse that God has for them, that forever partner, you want to have their heart. I can promise you. You want to have their heart, because if you have their heart, you can help place that heart where it ought to be instead of letting them make that decision on their own. The one who has the heart can place the heart. Number 2, the one who has the heart can protect the heart. I hope we're starting to see the importance of having your children's heart. Because see, if I have this heart, if my children will trust me with their heart, then when the attack of certain friends comes along and I say, no, we don't need to do that, I'm able to protect that heart. When this interest comes in, I'm able to say no, and this person comes in and we're able to say that's not good for you, or whatever the case may be, the attacks of Satan, the temptations of sin, all of these things that are going to come to your children, I can promise you. When those things come, if you have their heart, you can help protect them from those things. And they may not understand it all, but they are trusting you because I have given you my heart. And to the young people, be willing to give your heart to your parents, knowing that they can protect you from things that you don't even see. He who has the heart gets to protect the heart. You get to put walls around that heart, and you get to do things that will keep the devil away. Let me ask this way. The heart of a young person without protection. Anybody else think that might be a target for the devil? All day long. And if you don't think that's true, start talking to parents who didn't have a lot of protection in place and see if the devil did attack. Because the devil does attack. But if you have their heart and they give you that heart, it doesn't mean the devil won't attack. And it doesn't even mean that some things won't get through. But when you have their heart, you can help them through that process instead of just leaving them out to struggle and to suffer. If you have that heart, I can promise you, listen, young ladies, listen to this. Young men can be smooth. I mean smooth. And be just as devilish, just as deceitful. I mean, they are smooth. Just to hear you say, they're smooth. But you better make sure that that heart doesn't belong to that smooth talker. You keep that heart in the hands of mom and dad, because mom and dad can see some things that you don't see. And when they come and say, I think you need to back off of this a little bit, you're not always going to understand it. But if you say, Mom and Dad, I've given you my heart. And if you say I need to back off to be protected, then I'm willing to do that. I can promise you God will honor that. Boy, it would mean nothing more to me than, it would mean the world to me to have that difficult conversation with one of my children, having to get involved because I see danger. It would mean the world to me to hear them say, Dad, I trust you. I trust you. But that's not going to happen by accident. You have to have their heart. And young people, you have to give them your heart. You must give them your heart. Give me your heart. Observe my ways. Watch me. I'll help you. I'll guide you. I'll be there for you. But if you don't have their heart, you can't protect them. You know what happens? If their heart is here and you're over here, you can give all the warnings you want. But it's going to mean nothing. Just noise. Oh, that's just my mom and dad. Oh, they're just old and old-fashioned. They don't understand today. They don't understand how people do it today. They're so old-fashioned, and there's such a disconnect. And part of it is because parents haven't worked for the heart of their young people, and the other part is because young people aren't giving their heart to their parents. I hope we can see tonight the importance of both of those things. Parents, don't just stand back and say, give me your heart. Work for it. Earn it. Love it. And young people, be willing to give your heart. He who has the heart gets to place the heart, and he who has the heart gets to protect the heart. Parents who do not strive to have the heart of their children are trusting their children. They're trusting their children that their heart will be okay somebody else's protection. They'll figure it out. They'll be okay. They'll be fine. They might not be. You know how many people have been hurt at that early phase of life, and it carries with them the rest of their life because they weren't protected the way that they should have been? The world's full of it. Their friends cannot help them. You must help them. Let me give you third. Then lastly, the one who has the heart not only places the heart, protects the heart, but thirdly, can patch the heart. Mom, Dad, it's without fail. One of these times your child's going to come to you, and that heart's going to have a crease in it. It could be something as, let's say, simple as not getting along with my friends. Friendships hurt. Feelings hurt. This person said something and this person did something, but they come to you with this heart, with this broken heart. I feel this way, I feel that way. Mom, Dad, I've fallen into sin. Whatever the case may be, you can mark it down that eventually your child's heart is going to get bruised a little bit. It's going to get run over. And it may be something that to you seems so kind of small, the drama of young teenagers. But let's not forget, it may be small to us because we see the big picture, but to them they're hurting. See, if you don't have their heart, you can't protect them through that. You can't patch it up. If you don't have their heart, they're not going to come to you and say, I'm really hurting here and this and these things. And you can sit down with them and you can help mend that and help fix that and help repair that and help to build it and to strengthen it. But if you don't have their heart, they're not going to come to you to get patched up and repaired. Google search can't fix it. Teen magazines can't fix it. Friend conversations can't fix it. But if you don't have their heart, where are they going to go to get repaired? Has anybody ever reached marriage without their heart getting hurt? Absolutely not. It's going to happen. Matter of fact, another word for this is conviction. But if you don't have their heart, you don't get the chance to repair that. But if you do have their heart, then when they come to you saying, Dad, I'm hurting here and I'm hurting there, and I've been hurt by these friends or by this person or this deceitful, dirty, rotten boy. If you don't have their heart, they're not coming to you. But if you do, then you get to say, come here, it's okay. Because if you have their heart, you're the one they get comfort from. But if you don't have their heart, you're trusting everything else to repair that. They'll be fine. They'll figure it out. They'll make it through. No, God has placed you in their life for that reason. And when you have that heart, you can place it where it needs to be. You can protect it from the enemies. And you can patch it up when it's hurting. I think we would all agree these are all extremely important things when it comes to the spouse of our young people. Because if you're not involved in placing that heart, who knows where it'll end up? And if you're not watching out to protect that heart, who knows where it'll end up? And if you don't have that heart to patch it up, then when they hurt and they're confused and they're wondering and they have all this uncertainty and you don't have their heart, they're going to go to everybody else and to everything else, or they're just going to try to live with it. And it'll hurt them for a long time. Long time. We must have the heart of our young people. I talked to 3 preachers today. I was on the phone for 7.5 hours today. Does that sound fun to anybody? And only with 3 preachers. So obviously preachers do nothing on Wednesdays. Talked to 3 different preachers who have 3 children or more that are married. They've taken through this process. And all of them are married to good, godly people serving the Lord. Without telling the others what the ones before them had called, I called, simply said, here's what I'm working on, here's where I'm at. Without fail, all of them started off by saying, you have to have their heart. All 3 of them. You know what's interesting? All 3 of them have a different routine that their children had to go through before marriage. All 3 of them had a different timeline of when they could start different things. So I've learned through this that some of the details from family to family, that can vary. But if you don't have their heart, it doesn't matter what details you have, they're not going to follow. You must have their heart. Let me encourage you this way before we dismiss. If you have waited and you do not have their heart, then sit them down, apologize, and let them know that you want to capture their heart. And you seek their permission, give me thine heart. If you are a child here and you have not given your parents your heart, then sit them down, apologize, and let them know you give them your heart. And you seek their placement, their protection, and their patching up. Young people, you can trust your parents. And parents, let's work for it. Because if you don't have this, nothing's going to matter when it comes time. Nothing. We must have their heart.